He's not robbing banks. He's putting on a show. Give me my gun, and I'll do the rest.
James Knight versus a psychotic bank robber.
Let it begin.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 action thriller sequel, Detective Knight Redemption, a film that is written and directed by Edward Drake, and it stars Bruce Willis, Corey Large, John Cassini, Miranda Edwards, Paul Johansson, Bew Murkoff, and Lachlan Monroe. Now, this film is the sequel to Detective Knight Rogue that came out a few months ago, and it is a film I reviewed on this channel. And it was a film that I wasn't particularly impressed with. It was one of those direct-to-streaming stroke DVD releases of Bruce Willis's that we're all now familiar with, that he's done these last several years of, I think, diminishing quality, certainly. But apparently that this is the second one in a trilogy of Detective Knight films. So how does the sequel compare to the first? Well, I actually think this one is an improvement on the first one, if I'm being particularly honest. And this time round, with Bruce Willis's character James Knight is in prison after his actions in the first film, where he basically goes rogue because a group of robbers shoot his partner, almost kill him, so he goes rogue, goes to New York, I believe it is, and tries to find the killers, and he goes on a bit of a killing rampage. So he essentially, in this film, is in prison because of his actions in the first film. And in this film, there is a group of Santa Clauses going around robbing banks, and the leader of them, played by Paul Johansson, he's like a really charismatic preacher who's an ex-military guy. He's got this weird, he wants to push back against the system. He's recruiting criminals, so on and so forth, to rob banks dressed as Santa Clauses. And he also inspires a prison break, and it's the same prison where Bruce Willis is being detained, and also the main bad guy from the first film, played by Bew Murkoff. So a lot of prisoners break out of prison. Bruce Willis does not. He remains in his cell and is then recruited by the New York authorities to hunt down the leader of these rogue Santa Clauses. Right. So as I've said, I do think this is a bit of an improvement on the first film. I think the story in this one is a little bit easier to follow. I think the first one, me personally, thought the plot was a little bit overly convoluted. This time it's much simpler, basically. You got these Santa Clauses robbing banks with a charismatic leader. Bruce Willis is recruited to hunt them down. Now, we all know about Bruce Willis's situation. There's no sense going over old ground. We know his situation. So while he is a major character in this film, he doesn't have an awful lot of dialogue for obvious reasons. And you kind of only really see him when you need to, for the most part. The film is shouldered by Paul Johansson's character, who plays the leader of these Santa Clauses, this really charismatic preacher. And because he's quite a memorable character with quite an over-the-top performance, it makes the film memorable. You enjoy him, his presence on screen, sort of thing, and he's quite a memorable villain. And I also think we get to see a lot more in this film of Lachlan Monroe's character, who plays Bruce Willis's partner, who was shot in the first film. So you only saw him for a couple of minutes in the first film, if that. This time around, we see him on screen an awful lot more because he feels like he's got a debt of gratitude to the Bruce Willis's character, so he wants to go and help. So even though he's still injured and is in a wheelchair, he's trying to do his bit. So you see, there's some memorable scenes with this Lachlan Monroe character, especially him grilling the mayor in New York, I believe it is. So those two characters, I think, really prop up this film and make it much better and much more memorable. And then you've got this infighting within, this this group of Santa Clauses, you know, the head guy from the first film. And to be honest, I don't actually think the film needed him or his brother from the first film. I personally don't think they needed, but they did include them in this film, gave them a little bit of a redemption arc, I suppose. So you got this little bit of infighting going on there within this Santa Claus group, and the action that you get is pretty good. You know, when they're robbing the banks, it's pretty decent. They're pretty violent, and then you get a reasonably satisfying conclusion to the film with Bruce Willis walking around with a shotgun, killing everybody in sight, sort of thing. So it delivers on a lot of levels. However, it is certainly not what you would describe as a top draw, top class film. It's the sort of film that I would have loved to have seen Bruce Willis play this character maybe 20 years ago, because this character is really interesting. You know, this rogue police detective that kind of is disliked within his own kind because he just does things his own way, and he's quite happy to just, you know, kill whoever. He's almost like a modern day Dirty Harry in a lot of ways. So I would have loved to have seen Bruce Willis play this character 20 years ago when he was arguably at his prime. What we're getting now is, you look at it and you think just exactly what I've said. God, I wish we'd have got this a few years ago. It would have been really better with a bigger budget. Bruce Willis in his prime. I think this character and this trilogy of films, I think, would have been pretty good. What we've got is obviously a film with a much smaller budget, with obviously Bruce Willis's issues the way he is now. So it's at times a competent film, but at other times you look at it and you just think, oh, what could have been, to a large degree, which is a bit of a shame. And some of the dialogue as well in this film, it isn't great. You know, you get there was one scene in particular that I was just like, what? You get like this woman who's like the head of the authorities in New York, goes to see Bruce Willis in prison after the prison break, and she's kind of like, why didn't you leave? And he's like, why would I? And then she spends almost like 5 minutes berating him and slamming him for the person he is, what he's done, so on and so forth, and then basically turns around and asks for his help. And just like, really? You've just absolutely slammed this guy, and now you need his help. And you're just like, what is going on? So it's kind of full of stuff like that as well. You're just like scratching your head with some of the scenes and dialogue. But I do think it is an improvement on the first one. I don't think it's a vast improvement on the first one. But I do think this is certainly, in regards to a lot of the Bruce Willis releases over the last 2 or 3 years, this is one of the middling ones, I would suggest. But if you certainly enjoyed the first one, I think you will probably enjoy this one a little bit more. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.